Hello and welcome. This is Lucky, and I'm here today with Vhukudo. I'll be driving, and Vhukudo will be navigating. And today we are going through the first of our tutorials, which is basically doing the first thing that we did when we started HTMX, which is using a button to create an API request to fetch users and display them on our web page. But this time we did a little bit differently, and I will explain the changes that we have. So firstly, as you can see, we are now using a node.js on the back end. As you can see, we're having a node runtime here working, and we have a few more different files. We have our node modules here. Basically, this is just for our dependencies to make everything work. And then we have package.json and packagelog.json. And once again, this is just to install our dependencies to make everything work, as you can see here. And then we have our server.js, which will act as our backend. And then we have our index.html here, which will be our front end, where we are using HTMX, right? So the first thing that we have here is a heading that says simple request example, and you can see here we have a button. In this button we have the hx get attribute, which is an HTMX attribute, and as you can see, it's sending a get response to the slash users root, right? And then we have a hx target attribute here, which is another HTMX attribute, and as you can see, it's targeting the element that has the ID user. So whatever backend processes that will run will be the changes will be made to whatever element has the ID of users. As you can see, for us here on line 32, that is the div with the ID of users. As you can see, it's just an empty div, so we'll just be populating that div. And then we're just going to be using an hx indicator. As you can see, the one that we'll be using will be loading. It will be the element with the ID of loading, as you can see, which for us is the span right here. And then we just have a gif here, and we have the text loading and some tailwind styling, just to give it a loading indicator, loading symbol, right? And then we have our hx values. This is just to limit the number of responses we get to 3, and we'll change that to 5 to show the functionality. And then this class here is just tailwind styling, and as you can see, the inner HTML, the inner text of the button here is fetch users, because that's what we're going to be doing. So if I go to the back end, right, our JavaScript, as you can see right here, we have this is the code that we have to handle the get request that we are sending from our index.html. As you can see, this is the endpoint, the root that we're using, which is slash users. As you can see, at first we had these users here, these 3 users as an example, but we want to make a request to our API. As you can see, as part of the handling the get request, as you can see, we have an asynchronous function which takes in the parameters request and response, and then inside of that function we have a set timeout method, which inside of it has another asynchronous function, right? And then inside of the second asynchronous function we declare a variable called limit, and this line of code right here is just saying that add the limit that we have onto our where our request was sent, and limit it to whatever we wanted to limit it to. As you can see here, the limit is 3, and here we're going to limit it to 3, or if that fails we are going to limit it to 10, right? That's what the pipe symbol here represents. And then we're going to take our response, we're going to create a variable called response, and we're going to use the await keyword, and then we're going to make an API request, right? We're going to fetch from this link here, but then we're actually going to give it a limit. Our limit is going to be the limit that I already described. As you can see, it's either the values that we have on our front end or 10, right? And then we're going to create a variable called users, and we're going to use the await keyword. Is going to await the response, which is the API request that we made here. And then as soon as we get the response, we pass it from JSON, right? And then we use the .send method to send to the target. If you remember here, we have the target as the element with the ID of users. We're going to send the response to the target, right? And then the response will basically just be HTML. As you can see, we're going to have a heading, and we are going to have this logic here, as you can see, which is the response that we get is going to be in the form of an array, and we are just going to take that array and we're going to map over it. And then the map method, basically we're just going to run a function into every element of that array, and in that function we're taking user, which is each element of that array, and we're going to make a list out of those users. And since it's an array, we're going to use .join to convert it into a string, right? So we're going to have a unordered list, and it's just going to list the names, and it's going to apply the limit, and it's going to wait 2 seconds to do that, so that we actually can see our app load, right? And as you can see right here, it's going to be, the server is going to be listening on port 3000. So to run our code, as you can see, the HTML is very simple, the page is very simple. We have a button here. When I click the button, we get this loading GIF here, and then we get our users here. But then we can change, remember our limit was 3, we can actually change how many users we can get. We can go to index.html and change it from 3 to 5, and you'll see that if we run this again, when I click fetch users, it loads, and now it's supposed to give us 5 users, as you can see, and you can change that as many times as you want. So that was the first project.